today and still get the information. I want to apologize up front that I might be coughing during the presentation a little bit, but I'll do my best to keep it down. We are going to have plenty of time for questions and conversation after the presentation, so I really encourage you to put your questions in the chat, or we'll also just have time for conversation afterward. So thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today. This dashboard is the culmination of really years of work done in collaboration with our state's Director of Food Strategy, Julie Stelmazik, and many state agencies. The metrics that are selected for it are in alignment with our state food strategy, Rhode, and with the New England Feeding New England goal of reaching 30% New England grown food being eaten in New England by 2030. Our goal with this resource was really to offer everyone interested a free, regularly updated one-stop shop for important food system indicators that can show us how we're doing as a state when it comes to food access, food justice, food and climate, food sector workforce, our business sector, and our farm and seafood businesses in particular. So we're really hoping this is the beginning of a wonderful relationship between you and your organization and this tool, and that you will be able to use it to support your mission and your objectives and your programming in the future. Our aim is to give you easy access to these are just some examples of ways to use it, to set database strategic goals for your organization, to establish measurable objectives for your projects and programs, to add key facts to grant proposals and in talking with funders, to make points during public speaking opportunities, and of course, to support your views when you meet with decision makers, whether they are in your agency, your organization, your town, at the State House, or even in the governor's office. I also want to start by thanking Scott Sawyer for being here. Scott was instrumental to the development of this resource and will certainly contribute to the conversation after the presentation. I am going to start off by telling you a little bit about the Food Policy Council itself, in case you're not familiar with us. I'll tell you about why we created this resource. Then we'll actually go to the internet and do some poking around to our sources, our content, and our uses. I'll tell you a little bit about our plans for the future, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So the Rhode Island Food Policy Council is an independent nonprofit network made up of council members, about 25 council members, and hundreds of other food system stakeholders. If you're on this call, you are already part of our broader network. There are members from all over the state and experts in all parts of the food system, and everyone has a unique perspective on how things are going. But what everybody has in common is a passionate commitment to working together and a belief in our mission to promote an equitable, accessible, economically vibrant, and environmentally sustainable food system for all Rhode Islanders. And in our network, we pay attention to the entire food system. This means that inner circle of production, processing, distribution, retail, consumption, and food waste. And it also means paying attention to those outer circle pieces of supportive policy environment, capital access, and access to clean water, air, and healthy soils. And this dashboard reflects this attention paid to the full system as well. The way we work is across three big buckets of partnerships, programs, and policy. You can see here our partnerships range from those with community-based organizations and industry members to nonprofit leaders, state agencies, and elected officials. We do programs and projects that fill critical gaps, whether those are about food access programs, business support programs, educational work, and fundraising assistance in particular. And of course, policy, which includes advocating for policy that supports food justice, our food economy, our intersection between food, environment, and climate, and also guidance on long-term state plans. And that includes our state food strategy, Rhode, as well as other state plans. Together, our network members have developed a set of strategic objectives that inform everything we do. I'm not going to go over these strategic objectives in detail, but you can see here that for 2023, and really every year, we have a focus that ranges across food access, economic vitality, environmental stability, and really pieces around empowering the network and providing leadership and resources and direction. Before we dive into the metrics dashboard, the last thing I want to say is that everyone is invited to become an active part of this network. We convene primarily through 4 work groups, which you can see here, and all of them are open to everyone. If you want to get involved, just visit our website and sign up. You can also get in touch with Allie over the chat, and she can get you joined up as well. So why a metrics dashboard? As noted earlier, our goal was really to offer everyone this information so we can all see how we're doing as a state when it comes to our food system. This is important because we need a more just and resilient food system in order to ensure food security in times of crisis, successful food businesses, a strong workforce for our food system, and an environmentally sustainable way of growing, harvesting, processing, distributing food, and dealing with food waste. And we also need to ensure affordable access to appropriate food for all Rhode Islanders. Recently, a report from the New England Feeding New England project identified that in order to transition to a food system that reaches 30% New England grown food by 2030, we need almost 1 million more acres converted to farmland. We need more local food being purchased by institutions and by grocery stores. We need more regional processing infrastructure and easy ways for food purchasers to track and report their local food purchases. We also need many more consumers understanding why local and regional food is important to them. And reaching these goals is going to take everyone, from government agency heads to program managers for small community-based organizations. And in fact, all of us on this call are already working toward this goal. So we hope the dashboard will help you understand and position your programs, policies, plans, and proposals to maximize their effectiveness in helping Rhode Island move toward these shared goals. So this is meant to be an interactive webinar. If you happen to have access to 2 screens, please consider opening up this website at the top of your screen as well, and you can follow along with what I'm doing. We do want to acknowledge that there are a lot of indicators that aren't measured here, that could be measured to provide a more comprehensive picture of the food system. And we do hope to continue making additions to the dashboard over the years. So you might see something that you feel is incorrect. You might feel that an important metric is missing, and we want you to reach out to us if so. We plan to build on this over time, and we always want to improve on it where we can. So with that, it's going to take a little second for the internet to open this up. And I think here you can see the dashboard. So when you get to the dashboard homepage, you can see 5 different tabs that really are relevant to different parts of the food system. And I know that some of you on the call are much more interested in one part of these over the others. But because we have so many people on the call, I'm sure that there aren't just folks that want to look at one of them. I'm going to poke around a little bit, show you how it works, do a little bit of a dive into the data, but I also know that the amount of data we have here is overwhelming, and it's definitely not my intent to overwhelm you. We can dive in deeper where folks want to during the discussion section as well. So the way to get started is just to click on the link that you're most interested in. I'm going to click on food security and access. When you get there, you'll see some hopefully easy to understand instructions. How to get the most out of this dashboard. Read through from top to bottom to get the whole story. Scroll over charts to get nitty-gritty details. Click on a color in the key to hone in on that selection. And you can also enter full screen mode by clicking on a button in the lower right hand of each chart. I'll show you some of the more complex charts along the way as well. So here's the first chart we're going to look at food security in New England. We have a definition here, or a little blurb here, that gives you some background. Food insecurity is defined by USDA as the lack of consistent access to enough food for a healthy and active life. We provide you with some more information about rates of food insecurity in prose. And then we also give you the data sources right here. Wherever possible, we provided data that is for the past 20 years. So the way to operate the chart, they're all in a program called Tableau, which Scott Sawyer can tell you all about. You just click on one of these if you want to If you want to just look at Rhode Island, you click on Rhode Island. If you want to go back to the full color version, you just click on Rhode Island again in that case. And then when you scroll over the screen, it can give you specific information. So for instance, this is telling you that in Rhode Island, in the year 2013, the prevalence of food insecurity was 14.4%. In this particular chart, you can also see a gray area here that shows you when the Great Recession happened. So you can see the impact of the recession on food security in Rhode Island and in New England. You can also see the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you want to go into full screen, again, you just click this button right here. I think I'm going to do that on one of the later, more complex charts because this chart is actually pretty easy to see in this size. Scrolling down, you can see food security in Rhode Island shown by very low food security and then just low food security. Again, you have the blurb telling you by percent and number of households what's been going on over the past 20 years. And again, you can see the Great Recession and the impacts of that, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, this big jump that you can see here. We also have some mapping. We do intend on doing some more interactive mapping as one of the first updates, but you can see here the low income and low access census tracts by race. Wherever there is equity and demographic data available that can help us understand equity in our food system, we have done our best to use that data to provide a broader picture of what's happening. So here from our own Rhode Island Community Food Bank, we have food insecurity in Rhode Island by race and ethnicity, both in 2021 and in 2022. Scrolling down, you can see that data from the Rhode Island Community Food Bank for households with children in particular. We have it here just for 21 and 22. We can also back that out and have earlier years, although we didn't collect the data for all 20 of the past years for this particular one. After that food access data, you get into food security data. So we have information here regarding SNAP participation. And here you can see that we're starting to break things down by county. So if you operate in a particular county, say Providence County, you can come in here and you can see the number of SNAP benefits recipients. This is for the year 2009. And you can also scroll along and see how it's moved over the years. You can do that as well for any of the other counties. Here's SNAP participation in Rhode Island by race and ethnicity. And here's where I'm going to do the full screen maneuver to give you a little bit of a sense of when things get small like this. You can click on full screen and it'll give you a little bit larger of a version to show you information for different ethnicities. So for example, you can click on Hispanic, you can click on Black and white, Asian, Indigenous, and you can see the percentages of food insecurity. When you want to get back to the website, all you have to do is press escape and it'll bring you right back down to the next chart. So sometimes you have data that may look a little bit confusing. National school lunch participation in Rhode Island shows a huge drop off because of COVID-19 shutting the schools down. That doesn't mean that children weren't getting meals. It just switched to a different program that was called the Summer Food Service Program, which allowed for the grab and go style of distribution. So when the data looks a little bit confusing, we've used the text to share information that helps to clarify. So I'm going to go ahead and skip us over. You can see that there are there's other data here, but I know it does get a bit overwhelming and I want to provide some insight into our other data dashboard pages as well. So you can just go up to the top and click Data Dashboard and you can go to any one of our other sites. The one I'm going to look at next is Food System Economy, and don't worry, I won't spend that much time on all of the dashboard pages, but I do want to point out a few slides on each of them. You'll have the instructions on how to get the most out of the dashboard at the top of every page. So on this page, you have some more charts that are a little bit more complex in the way they operate. When that happens, you'll see a blue box on the right-hand side of the page that tells you that it's an interactive menu. So here we have total food system sales. And if you would like to see sales by different years, what you do is come right down here to the interactive menu, and you can select 2007, 2012, and 2017. When the data is split by year like that, you can rest assured that that's because those are the years that the federal government published that data. It happens every 5 years. So this is the chart we started with in this particular instance because we think it's really amazing that Rhode Island generated $12 billion in sales through its food system. And we want to make that clear up front. What this does is also show you where that value was coming from. So you can see here that wholesaling is the largest part in the year 2017, and it was a value of sales of $5.1 billion, which represented 43% of the total. And you can scroll over any of the bars to get a same level of information. Here we have food system sales by sector, and you can see that this chart has interactive tabs. So one is for food service and drinking places. This one is for grocery stores. And this one is for food and beverage manufacturing. When you want to look more closely at food and beverage manufacturing, you can scroll over and you can see both the dollar amount and the percent of the total represented by different types of manufacturing. So here's bakeries and tortilla manufacturing, other food manufacturing, dairy you can see here, and it gives you, again, the number and the total. Some boxes here get quite small. If you go into full screen, they will give you a larger view. I'm not going to do that right now, but rest assured that when you click on these smaller pieces, you can get all of the data that you need for all of those different years. Here's another way of looking at economic impact of food system sales that shows you that $12 billion, excuse me, down at the bottom. And it also shows you $23 billion figure when you add up total food system sales, which is the blue bar, and an output multiplier. So multipliers are complex and not everybody understands them. We do have a little bit of a description about what a multiplier is, but just want to note here that if you do work with people who understand multipliers, you could talk about the total economic impact being $12 billion in direct total food system sales, and then $23 billion if you look at indirect, which means business-to-business transactions and other types of spending. Food system employment and businesses compared to total employment. So you can see over the past 20 years, total food system employment made up about 10 to 12% of total employment, about 6% of all businesses. And then we also have food system employment by category. This is one that I will open up a little bit because I think it's hard to see when it's small and it's easier when it's larger. So if you want to understand, for example, what supermarkets and other grocery stores do, you can click here and get that chart. And you can also scroll along and see total employment, percent of total state employment, and percent of food system employment. Again, you just press escape if you want to get out of full screen. And then we have a number of charts here that I'm going to scroll past quickly for breakdowns, restaurant and bars, grocery stores. If something looks weird like this, it means there was missing data. It doesn't mean that lots of people lost their jobs. So we do try to make it clear when the data looks confusing about what is going on there. Food and beverage manufacturing, broken down by food in the orange and beverage in the blue. Food distribution, food production, again with a little bit of missing data. And then we also have farm employment. Here we also provide some really wonderful estimates made by our own URI about job estimate and economic impact. And again, this is one of those charts that you can scroll over to understand exactly how many jobs and what percent of the total number of jobs there are in agriculture in our state. And we end up with median hourly wages. We think it's really important to share this information because it shows us it shows us who's working full-time and still under the poverty level for our state. This is wages for all occupations, and this is a close-up of food preparation and serving wages. So you can see here, for example, that bartenders are primarily making below this hourly wage, which is below the poverty line for Rhode Island for a one adult household. So there's a lot more to explore in food system economy. I just want to maybe look really briefly at a couple of these other pages, because I know we have some folks on the call who are specifically interested in climate and agriculture and land use. I'm not sure if there's anyone who's particularly interested in seafood and commercial fisheries. And again, I want to make sure that we get to your questions and answers. Let's take a look briefly at agriculture and land use. It gives you land and agriculture in Rhode Island by county. And you can see that this is for the past 20 years in 5-year intervals. Land and agriculture in Rhode Island by category, showing you woodland, cropland, pasture land, which is our fruits and vegetables, and farmsteads. This is a map that shows projected agricultural land conversion from American Farmland Trust. This again is one of those maps that we will be making more interactive on our, when we do an update. But this shows you, if you want to look at it in this way, the red zones are where are urban and highly developed, and then it can also show you where American Farmland Trust predicts we will be losing 8,100 acres of farmland between now and 2040 if we don't have policies and programs, well-funded programs in place to ensure that our farmland stays in active farming. Farm real estate average value per acre. Interesting to note here that Rhode Island is consistently the highest average value per acre at almost $16,000. Number of farms by county. Number of farms by county and different category. Value of agricultural sales by county and category, and much more here. This pulls out edible agricultural sales in particular, because in Rhode Island we do a lot of nursery and landscape and sod farming, so that we wanted to show the edible agricultural sales in particular, because this is about the food system. I'm not going to open these up into full screen, but this is another chart where you can really get in and you can see, in this instance, the number of farms and value of agricultural sales by economic class. So what this is basically showing you is that a little more than 82% of Rhode Island farms had sales of less than $50,000 in 2017, whereas only 8 farms had sales of over $1 million and accounted for 29% of total sales. This shows you that it's really hard to be viable as a small and mid-sized farmer. And we have some more information on estimating the value from our own folks at URI here. I'm not going to scroll all the way through, but there's a lot more information there about agriculture and land use. And we'll take a very brief look, just a minute or two each, at climate and at seafood and commercial fisheries. Again, we can dive in more afterward. This is another interactive chart. It shows by actually depicting the global sources of greenhouse gas emissions. So the green is total food system, and this is total other. This is showing you that a lot of the global food system greenhouse gases are coming from our food system, which again does not just include agriculture, it also includes processing, distribution, and the transportation associated with that, and food waste. This is a breakdown of global food system emissions. You can scroll over and see emissions from production, land use change, meaning deforestation, waste, it's a big one, distribution, processing, and consumption. And that's globally. Here you can see the US food system emissions. So here you can see production, transportation, and on up the list. This is not just for Rhode Island, because these figures aren't available just for Rhode Island, but we do want to provide context on our global, on our climate page for what's going on nationwide and worldwide when we don't have Rhode Island figures. But what we do have is Rhode Island's greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which we have turned into this chart. You can see this is data that just came out quite recently, and it shows you for Rhode Island where our greenhouse gases are coming from. As we note here on the side, food system activities and greenhouse gas emissions are embedded in these categories. There's no particular food system category pulled out here. There's only agriculture, which is a really small piece of what's going on in Rhode Island. But what's missing, perhaps, is a look at our food system's wide greenhouse gas emissions. We take a close-up look at the fact that food waste is the most prevalent material in Rhode Island's waste stream. You can see here vegetative waste makes up 8.1% of our total. This is from a waste characterization study done by our Rhode Island Resource Recovery Corporation. And the reason this is so important is because as food decomposes, it creates methane, which is a greenhouse gas that's much more potent than carbon dioxide at trapping heat. Then we have some information about Rhode Island's average temperatures. Our air temperature over the last, well, since 1900, the ocean around Rhode Island, 3 different data sets, and then the through lines. This is a chart that shows you for New England a number of different types of risks, and because this one has a different key, I want to show you how it works. This is showing you extreme rainfall. If you scroll through, you can see county by county, climate risks rated as medium, low, high for heat stress, hurricanes, sea level rise, water stress, wildfires. And that comes from the New York Times and 427. And finally, we do an analysis of drought. We all know that we've been experiencing drought more regularly. This is the data that shows you abnormally dry years, moderate, severe, and extreme, which we experienced quite recently. And you can see these red lines starting to show up a little more often in the more recent years. And finally, a quick look at seafood and commercial fisheries. There isn't as much data here, but what we do have, you can look at both in terms of pounds and in terms of value of sales. And we've done this for the top 14 species. We also show you value per pound of Rhode Island commercial fisheries landings, aquaculture production in terms of acres and value of sales. You can see the drop there in 2020 because the restaurants had to close. And gross sales, again, this is from our own URI, showing us the dollar value of total fisheries and seafood broken down in many different ways. And also employment in Rhode Island seafood and fisheries sector being broken down in many different ways, as well as businesses. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen for a little while because that's pretty much what I wanted to get through in terms of a walkthrough. We are at 101, and I wanted to reserve the rest of the time to dive in deeper, to answer any questions, to get your suggestions for improvement. And also want to note that we are happy to do customized presentations. If you are in a state agency and you want your staff of a particular department to get a more in-depth walkthrough of a particular page, we are happy to do that. And not just for state agencies either. I mean, that goes for anyone who wants to use this data. I know it's not always easy to just have a dashboard dropped on you and know what to do with it. So this is all our effort to make it more useful. And Allie, were there any questions that came up in the chat that you want to? Okay, good. And yes. Scott, I hope you will come off mute to help. I'm sure you're going to be able to answer some of these questions better than me.
Yeah, so thanks very much. First of all, very exciting. We had some people come in and log off in the midst of it. So I just want to remind everyone that we are going to share this recording out as soon as we can. But I will start with a question from Kate early on in the chat. Kate from URI Snap Ed is asking how the dashboard can help with proposals and needs assessments.
Yeah, I think a lot of people on the call probably have some great ideas about that. I mean, I write grant proposals a lot as part of my job, and I find myself going regularly to the dashboard to pull information that helps me make a point. So if it's a you know, a proposal that's trying to get funding for a project related to food insecurity, then I'm going to go to that food access page and be able to have all the numbers, both from our, you know, our Rhode Island Community Food Bank and from the federal government and other sources easily at hand. So yeah, I would think that would be one way to use it. I don't know if you want to add anything there, Scott, but or others are welcome to add as well. I think there's like 1,000,001 uses for the dashboard. Allie, I want you to guide me because I see there's more coming in now, and I want you to help make it fair and go in order.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to thank Scott for adding this comment in the chat when you were going over the map about like the disproportionate low income access map with race and ethnicity. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that comment, Scott.
No, no, I think I covered it. It's just a highlight. There's more data. There's more data where that came. And like any other place in America, Rhode Island has significant racial and ethnic disparities.
Very true. And I see a note here from Kate Masery, definitely saying that she did want to go over seafood. So thank you for touching upon that, Nessa. Kate, is there anything else that Nessa didn't mention that you'd be interested in?
Hey, I'm happy to do a seafood specific walkthrough for you and your stakeholders anytime.
Thanks, Nessa. And I was just typing in the chat, Allie, like, no, I'm excited to kind of explore the dashboard, but I don't have any like specific questions at the moment. So thank you.
Well, that's great. And again, I'm sure there's a lot to think about. I mean, just learning how to walk through the dashboard is one thing, but then exploring it for your own purposes is a whole nother thing. So take your time and send any questions you like afterward. I'll drop my email in the chat again, as well as Nessa's. I also see a note here from Noreen, who is advocating for healthy school meals for all. So I wonder if there's something we can do to kind of touch upon that.
Well, we do have the school meals data in there, but as I mentioned, it doesn't show the whole picture. So I think it would be really interesting to have a conversation, and I have talked about this with Jessica, who I also see on the call, about how to better represent what happened during COVID with different programs being stood up and then ending. And that's one area that I'd love to, you know, to talk about supporting in that way. I think that Caitlin, also, you may want to add something about using the dashboard and just in general supporting that effort.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the dashboard, and I had actually only really spent time with the food access dashboard, so just sort of see the other ones, other topics is super interesting too. I mean, I think the most important thing for that purpose is that this is for the whole state. This is for us to use to track what we find most important, to keep track of, to measure our progress, what evaluation data is going to be most helpful as we write grants and as we explain what important work we're all doing, as we communicate with legislators. So this is for us to all kind of be on the same page and for us to adapt to our own needs. For school food specifically, you know, we definitely could look into adding the summer meal program. The way that the summer meal sites are tracked, it happens on other sites, but perhaps that's an option too for this, or we can link to that. And then as farm to school programs continue to grow in the state, there may be some really interesting data that we can show there. So it's kind of just the beginning and it's really exciting. So thank you for that question, Noreen. That was a great question.
Thank you.
Noreen, I see a follow-up question that I didn't notice until just now. Did you want to ask a little bit more? I see asking about aggregating data specifically for nutrition programs.
Well, no, it's basically, it was the same question. I'm sorry. I mean, I just find that the first question anybody asks is, how much will it cost? And I have yet to figure out where to find the data to answer that question, but I'm gonna go to work now.
So you mean specifically for healthy school meals for all?
Yes, yes. So for example, Justine Caldwell, state representative, has introduced legislation now. If you had to talk to a legislator, like, what are the facts, you know,
Right.
you can, and you're arming them too.
That's right. No, we
For that
definitely
next
want this to be
discussion.
used by legislators as well, and I think we've had a couple on the call today. So my suggestion, I think we worked with Rhode a little bit on this last year, was to reach out to the states of Maine and California to find
Mhm.
out how they did the calculation, and maybe Massachusetts now as well, and see if that is a calculation that would make sense for Rhode Island to adapt and use. And Jessica, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or if you were able to connect with folks, but that's kind of like my first take is, okay, there are some states that have already figured this out. Let's find out what they did. We had an intern who actually called those two departments and I think was able to speak with somebody in California, but didn't reach someone in Maine. And so we can certainly look up those notes as well. And because I don't remember offhand what the calculation was or what the numbers they came up with were. Yeah.
I don't
So
know, Nessa, if
happy
you want me to
follow up.
speak to
Yeah.
that for a sec, but just to say that we have a cost number, there is a calculation. I don't know that it's something you'd be able to easily derive from a dashboard like this because the programs are so nuanced, but it's certainly something like there's an advocacy group working on healthy school meals for all, and I think they're actually meeting with Representative Caldwell today, armed with some numbers that we've put together through the department. But Noreen, if you want to have a further conversation, I know we've been connected over email before, but you can definitely reach out to me.
Okay, I think that's a great plan. Yeah.
And in addition, one other thing, Noreen, I would say is if you're not already connected with Caitlin and the Food Policy Council's Food Access Working Group,
We
yeah,
have spoken. Yeah.
good place where a lot of conversation is going to be happening. Allie, I see a hand raised, but I also don't know where you are in the questions list.
I think we can take a pause on the stuff in the chat. I would definitely be happy to hear what Stephen wants to know.
Hi, can you all hear me? Yeah. I just had a question. So I would love this resource, and I also really appreciate the fact that it's all presented in a kind of value neutral way. Like there's not a judgment being made about what kind of agriculture we should be doing or what kind of food we should be eating. It's just sort of reporting what there is. But I'm curious if you've given any thought to like the fact that if you look at, you know, reporting that a lot of these things could be interpreted in two lights. So reporting on the proportion of economic activity that's generated by alcohol sales, for example, is potentially a positive selling point if you're talking to policymakers. But from the standpoint of health implications, that might actually be quite negative. Or if we're talking about the percentage of land that's dedicated to farming, if land that was taken out of production for food production is now being used for turf farming, as a lot of the farms in South County are, that could actually negatively impact our ability to produce food, especially if those farms are using, you know, forever chemicals that are specifically intended to affect plants other than grass. And I don't know if they are actually allowed to use those chemicals in Rhode Island or not, but that's just two examples off the top of my head where you could this data could kind of spin either way. And I don't know if we have any kind of obligation to kind of contextualize that.
Such a great central question. I'm sure Scott and I could talk about this forever. But what I'll say just in terms of framing is that the Food Policy Council is providing this as a resource. We're providing as a resource where we can have the data and just share it in a neutral way. We also do that with our bill tracker. We track every single food systems related bill that's introduced at our state house every year. And we just present them in a neutral way where we're not taking a position on whether something is good or bad. However, our active network members in our work groups absolutely take positions and advocate avidly on behalf of policy priorities. And so we think it's important to do both and to do, to kind of be neutral when it makes sense to be neutral, and then to take that data and interpret it to create priorities and advocate for those priorities. But we feel like we need to start from a neutral standpoint in order to be a trusted source of information. So there's definitely a lot of advocating and interpretation that happens at the council, but not something necessarily that I foresee happening within the dashboard itself. We just want to keep that updated and have it be a trusted source for folks. Yeah. I hope that answers your question pretty well, Scott. I don't know if there's anything you want to say.
No, that makes perfect sense. I was just curious how you sort of decided to handle that. So
These are all really good questions, everyone. Thank you. I see another question from Kate in the chat, Kate from URI SnapEd. In previous years, there was a dashboard or website that provided information where food stores are, bus routes, etc. Is that still on this platform?
So that mapping resource was created by Karen Karp and partners really quite early on in the Food Policy Council's existence, and that map does still exist, but it hasn't been kept up to date. We've talked with the Department of Health GIS mapping service about potentially doing an update. I don't know if anybody from that department is on right now. If you are, I'd be happy to pass it over to you. What we do have is we have an emergency food access map, and that's under resources. It's just on a different part of our website. But if you go under resources and you click on food access map, you can see a part of what you're talking about, Kate. So you can see where the grocery stores are that accept SNAP. You can see where the food pantries are, the senior meal sites, the school meal sites. And we have been doing our best to keep that updated, although I think the schools piece needs another update. What we don't have in there is that layered on with census tract demographic information or bus routes, that sort of thing.
I just want to acknowledge the time. We are exactly at 1 hour. So
are we at 1 hour?
We are, or just before. Sorry. We're just before. We have 15 minutes to go.
15 minutes. Okay, yeah, we still have 15 minutes. If folks have other questions, I'd love to go ahead and answer them. And if there aren't any more in the chat, please just feel free to unmute and ask.
I see no more in the chat, but if I missed one, please ping me. Send me a private message if you don't want to speak up. That's totally okay.
Okay. Well, this is not your last chance. I do want to say a couple of last words, however. We are going to keep this updated whenever new state and federal data becomes available. Our plan is to create a kind of state of the state's food system report once a year that will be a downloadable PDF that we'll share out with state agencies and on our website and more broadly toward the end of this calendar year, and then each year going forward. And if you think this webinar should be run more than this one time and a recording provided, then please let us know that as well. It's not our intention to do this again, but if you think it would be useful, please let us know. And finally, I just want to note that, as I said, there are a lot of things we haven't measured where there are metrics. There are also a lot of things that are very, very important that aren't measured and where there's just no good information available. And we want to acknowledge that and note that part of our longer range plan is to figure out what the most important missing metrics are for Rhode Island across these different categories, and to work with partners like universities and other research institutions to create strategies to get good data for those indicators to share. So last call for questions. Thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate it, and we will post the recording soon.
thank you.
Thank you so much.